Hello and welcome. My name is Anna and I work as a paranormal clearing specialist, a house healer, and I also educate people about spirituality and all things psychic. And today I'm going to be talking with you on a personal note. I thought it was time to share what it's like to be a paranormal addict and how I actually helped myself to move through my addiction and how it became part of my work and part of my lifestyle, and how it's actually very positive for me now. It's not as negative as it was when I first started out on this path. Now, this will be probably quite a long video, but there'll be some really interesting moments because I'm going to share it all. I'm just going to lay it all out on the table, embarrassment and all, about some of the stupid things that I did as part of my paranormal addiction. So hopefully you're not going to do the same silly things that I did that were quite detrimental to my mental health and also the energy of my home. All right, so let's get into it. Confession time. Confessions of a paranormal addict. Here we go. So as a child, I was always very tuned in to the psychic and the spiritual world around us, even from the age of 4. I can remember seeing beings moving around my house, and when I would attempt to tell my parents, they would just fob me off as daydreaming, not living in reality, living in the fairy world, and I was always labelled as being a bit weird and a bit different. It's just naturally how I am. I've always been super sensitive to energy, and the more I got into this work later in life as a house healer and a paranormal clearer and doing energy field assessments and clearings for people in my late 30s into 40s, it tended to ramp up quite a lot, because where you put your focus is what you are going to attract to yourself. But I always felt beings tapping me on the shoulder, on the bus, during school, at home, at my grandmother's, anywhere I would go, even the supermarket with my parents, I would pick up on the energetic changes in the environment. And no one listened to me. So I tended to keep all my experiences to myself. When you're a kid, people go, oh yeah, she's just tuning into the spiritual realm. She's seeing things around her, or they ignore you. When it's something that continues in your life and you have mental health issues in the family, then it's automatically determined that you are part of the mental health history of your family, which I wasn't. I even bought some books home, just books talking about ghosts and seances and ectoplasm, and my parents weren't terribly happy about this, so I was made to take them back because it challenged their perspectives. They didn't allow me to explore and develop my own ideas and my own thinking about what is in this reality, and that's okay. That was just their generation. That's what they did. So after school, I would go and hang out at the local library. I had a favourite corner, and I would gather my paranormal books and I would sit there and I would read and I would learn and I would reference and I would write down tools and techniques and things that I wanted to try at home to see if I could advance my spirituality, what I thought was spirituality, but I know that was totally different now. Advance my spiritual / paranormal connection. So getting into my 20s, I had a partner, had a family in later 20s, but I was always dabbling in watching paranormal movies, supernatural movies, X-Men. I loved anything that was paranormal. But I can see now how I was being preened by management. They were showing me that this is what you do. You are meant to be working in this field. Who could I see? What could I find out about? It was a total addiction. I thought about it probably 24 hours a day. Never slept very well. always tuned into the energetic realities that are around us, especially full moon time, when there were solar flares, when there were things going on in the cosmos. I would be particularly different or odd on those certain days. But I always knew I was okay. I always knew deep down that this is just part of who I am. But I had to learn the hard way, which is what I'm going to get onto in a minute, is that some of the things that I researched crossed over into magic, casting circles and casting spells that weren't appropriate for someone who did not have the knowledge to use them. So one of my very, very early experiences when I was living in the family home as an adult, I had a family here in the house, is that I would sit up really, really late. Everyone else had gone to bed and I would sit up, and I was allowed now to have these paranormal books. I'm an adult. I can have what I like in my home. So I would have some of these books sort of hidden away, or I'd be on the internet, always on the internet whenever I had a spare moment, researching, looking for things, looking for ways to connect with the paranormal. Because movies just didn't cut it after that. They just didn't give me the level of interaction. Because as you know, with most addictions, you get to a certain level where what you understand and what you know just doesn't feel the need. So you're exploring and you're always looking for more ways to connect. And the next level, thank you, the next level of connection. So I started practicing, and I felt like there was some paranormal beings in my house that weren't very nice. Because remember I said I was super, super sensitive, still am now. And I just knew that the topics I was dabbling in, the books I was bringing home, were attracting these beings. I can see it now, like eyes wide open. I can see what I was doing was giving me exactly what I wanted, but not in the way that I perceived I would be interacting with them. So they were disturbing my sleep and causing all sorts of problems. So I thought I would cast a circle around a particular chair that I used to sit in our lounge room. I'll never, ever forget this event that occurred. Some of you will believe me, some will go, oh, she's just making it up. She was dreaming. She was just, off on some loopy paranormal mind trip. So I cast this circle around my chair, which I thought was going to protect me from these paranormal beings that I perceived to be in the house. I was seeing flashes. I was seeing dark movements, seeing darkness in places where there shouldn't be darkness. Couldn't tell the partner. Put this circle round my chair, and I didn't understand what I was doing. What I did is I invoked a circle that would attract paranormal beings. Well, I got what I wanted, in a sense. I drifted off to sleep, thinking that I'd cast this wonderful salt circle around my chair, and that I was all going to be protected and all wonderful, and I could just have a little snooze there for a while before I went back to bed. And I'm in this chair and I'm kind of half asleep, and I'm just kind of looking around, one eye open. It was dark. It was pitch black dark. And this looming presence was standing over the top of me. It looked like a cloak. Couldn't see a face. Dark cloak. No face. That is not a good sign in anyone's terms for having something in your home. So anyway, this being, I'll be polite, this being thrust its skeletal hand into my chest. And I actually felt the penetration of energy going into where my physical heart was sitting. And it's like this being was squeezing. It was like it was trying to stop my heart from beating. Now, I did have a mad panic, probably for about 4 seconds, while this being is trying to squeeze the life out of my heart, until I plucked up the courage and I said, stop. Get out. Get out of my house. Now, I thought I said that out loud, like openly out loud. I was yelling it, but it was actually in my head. No one in the house came running. None of my kids came running. Partner's still fast asleep. This being let go of my heart because I had exerted my willpower. I'd found the courage to go, this is wrong. This is really bad. This is wrong. I've done the wrong thing by invoking whatever this thing is. Come into my supposedly protective circle. Anyway, it let go of my heart and it actually left the house, or so I thought. And for the next few weeks, it was very uncomfortable sitting in that chair. Like, it was just, no one else in the house would sit in that chair. It was known as Mum's chair. And you can see why, because the kids were like, I'm picking up on what's in that chair. Did I invoke these circles again for protection? No. When I actually read deeper into what I was doing, because I had a natural affinity and an addiction, like a really strong addiction for the paranormal, I in fact invoked this circle subconsciously, asking for these beings to come into my space. So I learnt from that. I vacuumed and I used white light and I played music and I did all those things back in those days that I knew would raise the vibration of that particular chair. Did to some degree. Everyone else was in bed and there I was reading these books again. It was really, I had such a strong drawing to understand more and more and more about the paranormal. So I'm sitting there reading this book, just reading it, not planning on invoking anything. There's this presence again. Oh my goodness. So embarrassing talking about this, but it may help someone out there with their level of paranormal addiction. Is that I called on higher vibrational beings. Archangel Michael and Jesus and God and all of the higher vibrational words that I could think of. I called on them to come into this space where I was sitting in this chair. And I just kept reciting a particular prayer. I can't remember what it was now. But it was just asking them to clear and cleanse the space that I was sitting in. And it worked. I improved on my paranormal addiction after that experience. I didn't watch any more paranormal movies. I took all these books back to the library. I went back to just living my home, family, work life. Didn't get involved in it. But it was still there. Until one night, one of my kids put a movie on that they were all into this paranormal stuff. And it triggered me back into my, they're saying psychosis, how terrible, how embarrassing. They triggered me back into my paranormal psychosis again. And I wanted to connect again. I wanted to find out what was more, what else was out there. Simmering away. And I had a friend at that time who was into using Ouija boards. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to feel like I'm being totally negative about Ouija boards and that they do have their place and they do have their place in the past. But everyone has their own perspective and I respect other people's paranormal understandings and beliefs. But I'm going to share mine today because this is something that absolutely happened. So I went and saw this friend of mine and she got out her Ouija board and I was like, oh, I haven't seen one of those before. And I was like, oh, that might be really interesting to see how she uses it. And she used to use it to what she would call on connecting to her spirit guide through this board. And as she opened it, took it out of its beautiful green velvet, I felt kind of sick in the stomach. It made me feel, it kind of repelled me. It was like, woof, like this energy came off it. And I'm like, okay, I'm in someone else's home. I can't really say anything. I'm just going to go with the flow and just see what happens. Anyway, the energy that was present in her Ouija board, she said, oh, this is the different energy today. I was going to laugh for a minute. I was going to have a little chuckle because I know where I'm going with this. There was a paranormal being, a dark energy, possibly demonic level being that presented itself as a lady in a green dress. And this lady in a green dress told me that I needed to open a portal in my house to let in higher vibrational beings. And still being in my stupid phase, as I will call it, I went, oh, this is interesting. Okay, so what are you talking about? What do you want me to do? Oh, my gosh. So she said, you need to take a piece of clear quartz. And on your front door, you need to draw a particular design. You'll be opening a doorway into the higher vibrational realms and you'll be able to work more closely with your spirit guides. And I went, whoa, how exciting. Those instructions. I did this thing Again, in the middle of the night, when everyone else is in bed, I'm roaming around the house. So I got up, drew this design, nothing happened. I'm like, what was I expecting? So I left it open, didn't I? Like, seriously, totally open. I opened a doorway into another reality. Now, I know now, an older, much wiser paranormal specialist is that you don't do stupid things like that. Seriously, you do not open a doorway, leave it open. Anyway, so the energy of the house changed. So being sensitive, I could feel the energy of the house changed. And I'm like, what do I do with that? So I'm looking online, how to close a portal in your front door. And nothing seemed to close this portal. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So in the meantime, I'd made myself a Ouija board. And I thought, okay, maybe I can talk to this lady in the green dress. If you could see me blushing right now, I feel quite hot and quite red, even if it's not coming through the screen. This is how embarrassed I am. But hopefully this will help someone, is that I made my own Ouija board. Now, I had a family. I didn't want them knowing what I was doing. So I used a piece of white laminate board, covered it in contact, so I could then write. I'm cunning. When you're in an addiction, when you've got an addict mindset, you will find ways to do things where people just don't know what you're doing. So, back to the story. I had this piece of white laminate board and I put a piece of clear contact on top so I could write yes, no, and write the alphabet and numbers. So I did this one day. I only worked part-time, so I was home when the kids were at school one day. So I made this Ouija board up in my bedroom on the ironing board for some reason. I just went up that end of the house. In those days, we didn't have mobile phones, or I didn't have a mobile phone. It was just the wall phone. Phone rings. Made the Ouija board, didn't invoke it, but the intention was there to open this doorway by writing the numbers and the letters. So I went away, answered the phone, came back about 10 minutes later, and it was hot in the centre. And I'm like, oh, I feel really sick. I feel sick. I actually nearly vomited. I felt that sick. It was hot in the centre. Now, you're looking at a piece of whiteboard on an ironing board. The iron was not turned on. It was not in the sunlight. This thing was hot. And I'm like, what do I do with this? Instead of closing it or attempting to close it, I just wiped off the numbers. And I thought, oh, she'll be right. And I'll just put it away. I'll just put it away. I actually took it out and put it in the wheelie bin, so it would be thrown out. No one would know. No one would be any wiser as to what this thing was. Well, when I came back into the house, there was something banging around in the ceiling. Now, most of you will go, oh, it's a possum, it's a rat, it's a mouse. No, this banging followed me around the house. If I was in the kitchen, it would be banging above my head. If I was walking up the hallway, it would be banging behind me, sort of in the ceiling. It was following me around the house. In this meantime, the universe, in all its divine glory, had sent me a female friend who did Reiki, who was into spirituality. She was an older lady, had much more, probably 10, 15, 20 years older than me. She was wiser and maturer, and she had a different approach to working with these energies. And I went to see her one day, and she said, look, you don't look well. You haven't slept, have you? And I went, no. Because when I was trying to sleep, it was tapping on the wall behind my head. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? No one else in the house could sense that it was there, other than when it stood at the front door in our lounge room. And people were going, oh, it's a bit cold. It's a bit cold in here. And the heater was on, middle of winter. The heater was on, the house was warm. But that corner was cold. Because remember, the portal is open. This paranormal being was standing at the front door when we were all in the lounge room. Now, I never hurt anybody. These beings do not harm us like you see in the movies. This is one of the things I've learnt as part of my paranormal journey. So this addiction has had its positives, but also its negatives. I've had to learn the hard way, which is the only way some of us learn. Anyway, back to the lady. She said, look, can I come to your house? So she came to my house. And as soon as she came to my house, the energy started to shift. I felt this very sudden shift when she came to my back door. She said, I wouldn't go to your front door. She said, I could feel it was pulsating out this energy that made her feel uncomfortable. So she came in the back door. Now she would use sound. She had what they called a tincture bell, which was a brass bell that had a crystal inside it as the little dingly moving thing. So she went around the house, checking the energy of the home, dingling this little bell. Every room that she went into was pretty good. She said, the energy's good in this room, good in this room. It's no good in the lounge room, but we'll get to that later. She went all around the house and she went, no, this whatever it is has stationed itself in the lounge room. Now she could see it. She sees much clearer than I do. I am what they call clairsentient. So I feel these energies. Like when I connect to people's homes, they come through the cords, I can feel them. Even looking at the address now when I do house clearing work. I read the address and it's like, oh, this being's there. Back to the story. Anyway, she went to the lounge room and I'm very timidly walking along behind her like this. I'm watching what she's doing and I'm not scared, I'm not frightened, because remember, addict, I'm in that addict mindset of I want to know what's happening. How's she going to clear this being? Anyway, she goes all around the room with her little tingly bell till she gets to the front door. She gets to the front door and stands there with this bell, and she stands there like this. She was wearing this big piece of tourmaline. She could feel it vibrating. She said to me, oh, it's right here. I wasn't actually in the front door, it was standing next to the front door. And she got this bell and she tried to get this bell to do the tingle. It would not move. That is how dense the energy was at the front door. She stood there. She looked at this space in the door and she was mumbling this prayer under her breath. And she stood there with the bell and she held this bell and she kept saying the prayer and trying to get this bell to tingle until it started to move. This energy dissipated because it knew it couldn't stay. It knew that she was more powerful than me and that if she left and it came back, I would just get her back again. Right? Because I hadn't learnt at this stage how to do the clearing work that I do today. When I talk about these beings, they affect my throat. So I don't know if you can hear, I've got quite croaky and my throat is a little bit raspy. That is just because I'm sharing this paranormal stuff. That is how they affect me. It's one of my physical signs. So she cleared that being from my lounge room. While she was there, she said, how about we deal with that portal that you've opened? Oh my gosh. So she stood there again and she was doing all these hand signals because she did Reiki. She was using the power of her connection to Archangel Michael when she does her Reiki. She brought that energy into the home, focused that energy on the doorway and used that through making the Reiki symbols. I didn't understand them, still don't, not my thing, to actually close that doorway. So I learned a lot from those two experiences about things to not do. Now, in my 40s, I started to learn I changed my paranormal addiction into more of a spiritual focus. I knew there was higher vibrational beings, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn to read hands. So I went through a stage, probably for about 15 years, of being what most people would call a psychic reader. It was all about life direction, finding life balance, obstacles, things that you need to remove from your life. And then I discovered numerology. So I found that I could hone my spiritual and my psychic skills for doing those two practices. And I did wonderful readings with people. I had a great time. But there was still that underlying paranormal addiction, which I had toned right back. So I learned to just watch movies for a while. until I discovered pendulum dowsing. And using, because I've been doing the cards and the numerology, they kind of, again, satisfied some level of connecting with invisible beings, whether they be positive or whether they be the lower vibrational. So I started learning how to use a pendulum. It spins instantly. It gives me a yes, gives me a no. I knew that was what was going to work for me. So then I would just practice. I didn't have any particular intent to connect to positive, probably more positive beings, but no intent to use it to connect to paranormal beings. So I would use it as part of my readings with my clients. They'd ask a question. I'd use the dowsing to add a bit more interest to what I was doing with people. And it was, to some level, fulfilling my paranormal addiction. I was seeing this piece of crystal on a chain moving, and I'm like, whoa, that's pretty trippy. I use these at markets now, and I'm demonstrating them with people, and they're like, whoa, that's like spinning my mind. And that was the stage that I was at. It filled that need for having some sort of paranormal connection. And then in my mid-40s, I discovered that I had a natural skill for tuning into people's energy fields and feeling paranormal beings present in their space. So I designed sort of my own little modality, started working with friends, doing energy field clearings and assessments for them. And my list of 10 things that I was looking for very quickly grew over the next 15 years to 30 different negative energetic aspects that can be present in people's personal space. Energy fields. And then I discovered house healing through a chap that I saw online. And I did some work with him, and he helped me understand the earth energy lines and the geopathic side of clearing spaces and how to use a floor plan, which is something I'd not done. I mean, I'd done paranormal clearings on people's homes by walking into the physical space. I had no idea that you could do this long distance. But my paranormal addiction took me to, and I'm going to use the word love, even though they don't like it, a love of working with the lower vibrational beings. I understand them. Darker energy beings are misunderstood. They have been misrepresented through the movies, and they were looking for someone to represent them in a more positive way about why they are here, who they are, why they're here, and how people like myself, if you choose to, can help them. So this is what I am doing now at the age of nearly 54, and I'm actually loving it. I have turned around my paranormal addiction from being something scary at the beginning, doing a few silly things that I learned from, to then adjusting my practices into more spiritual. And now I utilize my spiritual practices working with these dark energy beings, and they are so grateful. If you're interested in knowing definitions of dark and demonic level being, a whole chapter on signs and symptoms, another chapter on attachment methods, some solutions you can use when you're working with spirits, and some dark energies people can ship from home. Paranormal addiction, I had to include a chapter on that in my book, and where they go and what happens to them once they choose to transition. It's a fabulous journey for them and for us as readers and for the earth as a whole. So I hope you've enjoyed this today. I'm going to go and have some lunch now because it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm really famished. So thank you, and I will see you again soon. I put out videos every Tuesday, and stay safe and look after each other.